This is not gonna be just another best neighborhoods in St. Petersburg video where I name 5 pretty areas and call it a day. The real question is not what's the best neighborhood, it's how can you avoid making a costly mistake by thinking about which neighborhoods actually fit your lifestyle, your monthly budget, your insurance comfort level, and the kind of Florida life you're trying to build. In this video, I'm walking through the St. Pete neighborhoods I'd actually consider in the $600,000 to $900,000 price range in 2026. But more importantly, I'll show you the framework that I use so that you know how to think about home shopping here in general. If you're new here, I'm Alexi, your St. Pete Clearwater realtor. I also put together a neighborhood fit quiz that'll help you figure out which St. Pete or Pinellas County neighborhood actually fits your lifestyle and budget. There's a link for that in the description. And for any French speakers watching, je parle français aussi. Now let's dive into the video. The first neighborhood I'd consider in this price range is historic Kenwood. Kenwood can be a really good fit for buyers who want character homes, a creative, artsy neighborhood feel, and a central location that gives you access to a lot of what St. Pete has to offer. You're close to Grand Central, you're close to downtown, you're not too far from the beaches, and you have pretty easy access to major roads. It's also one of those neighborhoods where St. Pete really feels like St. Pete. You've got older homes, front porches, murals nearby, restaurants, breweries, neighborhood parks, and that creative energy that a lot of people are looking for when they say they want something with personality. And one of the big practical advantages is that Kenwood is not in a flood zone, which can make a big difference when you're thinking about insurance and long-term ownership costs. Now, what does the $600 to $900 price range get you here? At the lower end of the range, you may be looking at smaller to medium-sized renovated bungalows or craftsman-style homes like this renovated, charming 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath bungalow with a 2-car garage that sold for $620,000. This is the kind of property that gives you charm, location, and a real St. Pete feel without necessarily pushing you all the way to the top of the budget. Another thing you'll sometimes find in Kenwood is a guest house or a garage apartment or detached ADU in addition to the main home. That can really be helpful if you want potential additional income to offset ownership costs, or if you want a separate place for your friends and family to visit so they can be close, but not so close that they're drinking your coffee every morning and asking you where the towels are. For example, this renovated craftsman style property has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,400 square foot main home, plus a 360 square foot detached ADU guest house. And at the time of making this video, it's currently under contract with an asking price of $740,000. In the last 5 years, there's also been a lot of builder activity in the area. So you may find new construction townhomes here, like this brand new construction townhome by David Weekley Homes with 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage that sold for $635,000. So if you want a more modern, lower maintenance setup, but still want to be in a central St. Pete location, this can be a really interesting option for you. At the higher end of the range, you may start seeing newer construction single-family homes or beautifully restored historic homes with more square footage and higher end finishes. This is a 2017 built home with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, around 3,000 square feet, and a 2-car garage that's currently under contract with an asking price of $825,000. And these newer construction homes can really be good value for the right buyer because you're getting updated modern construction without necessarily paying the full new construction premium. You'll also have lower maintenance and way better insurance options compared to much older historic homes. And finally, the best for last, you can find some really beautifully renovated homes that look like they came straight out of a magazine or your Pinterest board. This is a restored 3-bedroom, 2-bath craftsman style home, around 1,600 square feet with a 2-car garage, minutes from downtown. It sold after only 4 days on the market with multiple offers over asking price. for $837,500. So Kenwood has a lot going for it. The attraction is pretty obvious. It has character, location, central access, and a neighborhood feel that is very St. Pete. But there are some trade-offs. Most of these are older homes, so you want to pay close attention to things like the condition of the roof, electrical and plumbing, termite history, since many of these homes are wood frame, permits, renovation quality, and insurance costs. A house can look beautiful online, but if the roof is older, the electrical wiring is outdated, or the renovations were done in a way that looks nice but wasn't permitted properly, that can create issues. Parking and storage can also be more limited depending on the property. Some homes are smaller than buyers expect, and if you're coming from a newer suburban home in another state, older homes can feel charming until you realize they don't always come with giant closets, garages, and kitchen pantries. So I'd consider Kenwood if you care more about charm, location, and personality than having a giant house on a giant lot. I would not put Kenwood at the top of the list if you want a very quiet suburban feel, a big yard, a large garage, or if you really don't want to do the older home due diligence. Now, if you like that central St. Pete feel but want something that can feel a little more established and residential, then I'd look at Allendale Terrace and Crescent Heights. These are neighborhoods I'd consider if you want a polished residential feel, still have central St. Pete access and character homes with a more established neighborhood environment. You're also further north, so you have easier access to Tampa and the interstate compared to some other parts of St. Pete, and you still feel connected to downtown. This area is also not in a flood zone, which again is something a lot of out-of-state buyers are paying closer attention to now. And in this $600,000 to $900,000 price range, you'll see a mix of updated single-family homes, early 1900s homes, mid-century homes, and some newer construction at the higher end of the range. Here's an example of a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom with around 1,800 square feet and a 2-car garage, currently on the market for $600,000. This one is a 2025 built home with 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, around 2,800 square feet, and a 1-car garage that sold for $860,000. And you can also find beautifully restored homes with pools or larger lots like this restored 1920s 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with 1,700 square feet and a nice pool on a 6,500 square foot lot that sold for $905,000. Compared to Kenwood, you may not find quite as much of that artsy bungalow feel, but you can still find a lot of character and a little more of a settled residential environment. The trade-offs are pretty straightforward. Inventory can be limited, updated homes can carry a premium, older homes still need careful inspection, and property condition can vary street by street. So I probably wouldn't prioritize this area if your #1 goal is maximum square footage for the money, or if you want to walk to absolutely everything. Moving on to a neighborhood that is usually less flashy but very practical. Disston Heights is one of those areas that doesn't always get the same attention as the more historic or lifestyle heavy neighborhoods, but I think it deserves a serious look, especially if you're trying to stay closer to the lower end of this price range. This area can be a great fit if you want practical single-family homes, central access, better value compared to trendier neighborhoods, and a more everyday residential feel. A lot of homes here are block construction from the 1950s and 60s, and most of Disston Heights is not in a flood zone, which definitely helps with the insurance conversation. It's centrally located, so you have access to downtown St. Pete, the beaches, Greater Pinellas County, and Tampa. You're not necessarily buying the most famous neighborhood name, but you're getting a very functional location. And that's why I like talking about it. A lot of buyers move here and only know the neighborhoods they've seen on YouTube and Instagram, but sometimes the less flashy area is the one that actually gives you the house, the location, and the monthly payment that makes sense. Like this updated 4-bedroom, 2-bath home with a 2-car garage and around 1,900 square feet that sold for $668,000. or this 1,600 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2-bath pool home with a 1-car garage that sold for $615,000. So compared to a place like Old Northeast or Kenwood, your money can go further here in terms of square footage, garage space, pool potential, and practical everyday living. The trade-offs are that Disston Heights generally has less storybook charm than places like Kenwood or Old Northeast. It's not as walkable to downtown, and it's more practical than lifestyle heavy. If you're imagining brick streets, grand historic homes, front porches, and coffee shops around the corner, this may not be the best match. But if you want a solid St. Pete location, a more functional home, and you don't need your neighborhood to be the one everyone talks about at brunch, Disston Heights may be worth considering. And if you're watching this and thinking, okay, I'm still not totally sure which area fits us, you can start with the neighborhood fit quiz that's linked below. It's helped many of my clients think through lifestyle, budget, and what kind of area actually makes sense. And if you want help comparing specific neighborhoods or specific homes, there's also a link to book a free one-on-one call with me, or you can scan that QR code. Now let's move to a completely different lifestyle option, downtown St. Pete. Downtown is very different from the neighborhoods we just talked about. It's the lifestyle first option. It's a great fit if you want walkability, restaurants, coffee shops, museums, nightlife, events, waterfront parks, and convenience. If you want to park your car on a Friday and not touch it again until Monday, this is where that lifestyle starts to make sense. In the $600,000 to $900,000 range here, you're going to be looking at condos and townhomes. That's gonna vary between smaller luxury units, older condo buildings with larger floor plans, or newer updated buildings. For example, here's a downtown 3-bedroom, 3-bath condo around 1,650 square feet with covered parking and a monthly HOA fee of $769 in a community built in 2023 that sold for $675,000. And here's a 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhome around 1,800 square feet, built in 1982 with a private 2-car garage and an HOA fee of $1,200 a month that sold for $855,000. So there are definitely options in this range, but you do have to understand what you're buying. A $750K condo with a high HOA fee can feel very different monthly than a $750K single family home somewhere else in St. Pete. So you really have to compare the full monthly cost, not just the purchase price. That means looking at HOA fees, condo reserves, special assessments, community rules and regulations, and whether the monthly payment still makes sense after all that. And I know that's not the most glamorous part of buying a downtown condo. The view is more fun, the rooftop pool is more fun, the lobby that smells like expensive candles is more fun. But the condo documents really matter because you're not just buying your unit, you're buying into the financial health of the building. I would not put downtown at the top of the list if you want a big yard, private pool, maximum square footage, quiet residential streets, no HOA rules, or if you're uncomfortable with potential assessments or building level financial risk. I would consider it if your priority is lifestyle walkability, convenience, and a low maintenance living, and you're comfortable doing serious condo due diligence before buying. Now, if you like the idea of being close to downtown, but still want more of a traditional neighborhood feel, that's where areas like Old Northeast and Crescent Lake start to come in. These are for people who like the idea of being close to downtown but still want more of a neighborhood feel. Think front porches, older homes, tree-lined streets, parks, historic character, coffee nearby, restaurants nearby, and a lifestyle that feels active but not fully urban. You're close to the downtown energy, but you're not necessarily living in a high-rise or right in the middle of the event traffic. But the trade-off is you're often paying heavily for location and neighborhood feel. At this $600,000 to $900,000 budget, buyers may be looking at charming properties with condition or size considerations, older homes that may need updates, smaller single-family homes, or homes where location and character are a major part of the value. For example, this restored 2-bedroom, 1-bath historic 1920s home with a 1-car garage and 1,100 square feet is listed at $784,000. Another example would be this charming craftsman style 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath home with almost 1,700 square feet, but no garage, a smaller lot, and some renovations needed that sold for $860,000. So even toward the higher end of this range, there are still compromises. In these areas, you're often paying for the location and the neighborhood feel as much as the house itself. And the trade-offs are very real. You'll want to think carefully about older home systems like roof age, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, insurance costs that can climb in the tens of thousands of dollars per year, and the higher price per square foot compared to more inland areas. Also, some parts of these areas can be in flood zones, so you cannot assume that every home has the same risk profile just because the neighborhood name sounds good. Competition for well-renovated homes can also be very high because a lot of people want this lifestyle and are sometimes willing to pay well over asking price to get it. So I'd consider Old Northeast or Crescent Lake if you want charm, proximity to downtown, and a more residential feel, and you're okay trading some square footage, newer finishes, and higher ownership costs for location. All right, let's talk about the neighborhoods that get a lot of attention because of their proximity to the water, and this is where the conversation gets very important. Riviera Bay and Venetian Isles are very different from some of the inland neighborhoods we talked about so far. These areas may be a fit if you want water access or water adjacent living, boating lifestyle, and higher end neighborhood feel, proximity to downtown in the Bay, and a more coastal St. Pete experience. But this is also where we need to slow things down. When you're buying closer to the water in St. Pete, especially in this budget range, the due diligence matters a lot. At the lower end of the range, you'll find homes that are near the water but not quite waterfront, like this recently renovated 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a pool and almost 1,800 square feet that sold for $645,000. At the higher end of the range, you may find waterfront opportunities, but often with major condition or risk considerations. For example, this flood-damaged 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom waterfront pool home in Venetian Isles with direct access to the bay sold for $905,000. But that kind of property is going to need complete remediation, a full renovation, or potentially even a tear down and new construction plan. The monthly cost of these homes can vary dramatically depending on flood zone, elevation, and the history of the property. And to be clear, I'm not saying don't buy near the water, but I am saying you do need to understand exactly what you're buying, because two homes that look very similar online can have very different risk profiles and very different monthly costs. In these areas, you want to pay close attention to flood zones, evacuation zones, insurance, prior water intrusion history, renovation quality, permitting history, resale considerations, and long-term ownership costs. And one thing to understand is that when you see a lot of newly renovated homes in a certain coastal area, you want to ask why, because oftentimes those homes were flood damaged and then renovated afterwards. And that doesn't automatically mean the home is bad, but you do need to understand what happened, what was repaired, whether the work was permitted, what systems were replaced, and whether the home makes sense long-term. I'd consider Riviera Bay or Venetian Isles if you really value the coastal lifestyle and you're comfortable doing the extra due diligence before buying. I would be more cautious if you want the lowest maintenance ownership experience, or if you're uncomfortable with flood exposure, if you want very predictable insurance costs, or if you're stretching your budget just to get closer to the water. So now let's zoom out and talk about how to think about home shopping in St. Pete generally, whether you're looking in these specific neighborhoods or somewhere else entirely. The neighborhoods and homes we just talked about are only examples. The bigger lesson is how to compare any St. Pete neighborhood before you fly in from out of state and start making offers. Before looking seriously at homes, I'd rank a few things. First, lifestyle fit. Do you want walkability, beach access, boating or water access, quiet residential streets? You have to decide what matters most. Second, property fit. Do you want a fully updated home, or are you okay with older systems that require more maintenance? Do you need a pool or a garage? Do you want the privacy and independence of a single family home, or are you open to the convenience of a condo or townhome? Third is true monthly cost. This is where you look beyond the list price. You want to think about mortgage, property taxes, homeowners insurance, flood insurance, HOA fees, maintenance reserves, and anything else that affects the actual monthly cost of owning the home. Fourth is risk tolerance. This is where you consider flood zones and evacuation zones, condo reserves and assessments, which ultimately can impact your resale risk. Some buyers are totally comfortable with more complexity if the lifestyle payoff is there. Other buyers want something as simple and predictable as possible. And fifth is your visit strategy. If you're coming from out of state, don't tour 20 random homes across the county. That's how you end up exhausted and sitting in your rental car at the end of your trip, more confused than when you got here. Instead, start with a few neighborhood types, compare lifestyle first, then compare specific homes and build a short list before flying in. Use the neighborhood fit quiz link below as a first filter and then narrow down from there. And if you take the quiz and want help turning that into a real neighborhood shortlist, there's also a link below and you can scan that QR code to book a free one-on-one strategy call with me. Tell me where you're moving from, your target payment, and what kind of lifestyle you're trying to create, and I'll help you narrow down the areas that actually make sense before you fly in. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.